quiet, unassuming expanse of a typical suburban neighborhood, where days often unfolded with predictable rhythms and a hum of everyday life offered a sense of calm, an unsettling silence began to permeate the familiar air. This was a kind of place where unexpected events were rare and community bonds, though sometimes subtle, often provided a quiet comfort. Yet, this very ordinariness was abruptly shattered by an urgent report that reverberated through the tight-knit community and beyond. 23-year-old Emily was missing. Emily was more than just a resident of this tranquil area. She was a vibrant and cherished presence, known for her infectious laugh, her boundless energy, and her unwavering dependability. She brought warmth and light to all who knew her. Emily was deeply connected to her family and a wide circle of friends, a young woman with plans, dreams, and a meticulous approach to her commitments. Her sudden absence was therefore not merely an inconvenience. It was a profound void where laughter and conversation should have been. The alarm bells truly began to sound when Emily failed to show up for a planned family gathering, an event she had meticulously prepared for and would never, under any normal circumstances, willingly miss. Repeated phone calls went straight to voicemail. Her text messages remained unread, and the initial wave of worry among her family quickly escalated into a chilling dread that settled deep in their stomachs. This was profoundly unlike Emily. Her punctuality, her thoughtful communication, and her unwavering commitment to her loved ones were central to her character. Her family knew, with a certainty that chilled them to bone, that something was terribly wrong. Emily was not one to simply disappear without a word, especially not for this long, and certainly not without contacting someone she loved to alleviate their concern. Their immediate and escalating concern led them directly to Emily's apartment, the place she shared with her boyfriend, Jake. It was here, within the very space that held so many of Emily's recent memories, that the initial, confusing pieces of the puzzle began to surface, delivered by Jake himself. He met Emily's anxious family members at the door, his face a mask of what appeared to be genuine concern, his demeanor suggesting a man deeply worried about his missing partner. He calmly explained that Emily had left their apartment after a heated argument the previous night and had not returned since. He painted a plausible, if unsettling, picture of sudden, emotional departure, suggesting that Emily had simply walked out in a fit of anger, perhaps needing space or time to cool down, and was now somewhere unknown. He spoke of the common disagreements that arise in relationships, attempting to normalize the situation as an ordinary lover's quarrel that had simply gone awry. His account, delivered with what seemed to be a convincing display of worry and cooperation, provided a preliminary, albeit vague, explanation for her absence. He offered details about the argument, though he kept them somewhat general, suggesting it was about typical relationship pressures. He mentioned specific times, certain reactions Emily had, reinforcing the idea of a spontaneous, emotional exit. Yet, even as he spoke, the family, grappling with their confusion and overwhelming fear, found his words doing little to quell their escalating anxiety. Instead, they fueled a growing sense of unease. Emily might have argued, but disappearing entirely, with no contact, was simply not her way. Her car was still in the parking lot. Her purse and wallet were supposedly still in the apartment. How far could she have gone? Why hadn't she reached out by now? The suburban quiet that had once defined their neighborhood was now laced with invisible tension, a growing undercurrent of dread, as the full weight of Emily's disappearance settled upon them. The search for Emily had just begun, but it was rapidly evolving from a simple missing persons case into a complex and deeply unsettling mystery. It was a mystery that would soon challenge the very fabric of trust in their seemingly peaceful community, leaving everyone who heard the story to wonder, where had Emily truly gone, and what truly transpired on that fateful night within the walls of her own home. The narrative had begun, not with a crime, but with an absence, an empty space where a vibrant life should have been, leaving only questions and a gnawing uncertainty. The immediate aftermath of Emily's inexplicable disappearance plunged her family into an agonizing limbo, a state of profound uncertainty that no words or reassurances could alleviate. Their escalating alarm swiftly reached the local authorities, prompting the formal initiation of a missing person investigation. The case landed on the desks of Detective Harding and his partner, Detective Ramirez, seasoned investigators whose careers had spanned countless cases of human distress, yet who remained committed to the cold, hard fact of evidence and procedure. Their very first and most crucial step in unraveling the mystery was to interview the last person known to have seen Emily, her boyfriend Jake. Jake was brought into the precinct, not under suspicion, but as a key witness, a seemingly concerned partner who could shed the most light on Emily's final known moments. He entered the interview room with an outwardly calm and composed demeanor, projecting an image of a man genuinely worried about his missing girlfriend. He spoke softly, his voice measured, maintaining steady eye contact with both detectives. He readily offered his full assistance, reiterating his desire to cooperate in any way possible to help find Emily. He presented a seemingly coherent and meticulously detailed account of their last interaction, explaining that Emily had left their apartment after a heated argument the previous night. He described the argument as a typical relationship disagreement, one that had escalated quickly, ultimately leading to Emily's frustrated departure. He spoke of her grabbing her keys, her swift exit, and the sound of the apartment door closing firmly behind her. He emphasized his belief that she simply needed space, suggesting she might have gone to a friend's house, or perhaps driven somewhere to clear her head, implying that such a temporary departure was within the realm of possibility, given their recent tension. Detective Harding, with years of experience honed in reading subtle human behaviors, listened intently to Jake's narrative, his gaze unwavering, his mind sifting through every word. He noted the almost clinical precision of Jake's recollection, the absence of emotional wavering, which struck him as somewhat unusual given the circumstances. Ramirez, meanwhile, diligently took notes, meticulously cataloging every detail Jake offered. Specific times, the exact words exchanged, Emily's precise reactions, and Jake's subsequent actions. They asked Jake to recount his activities after Emily purportedly left, what he did in the apartment, when he decided to go to bed, when he woke up, if he had checked on her throughout the night, or if he had heard from anyone else regarding Emily's whereabouts. Jake provided a minute-by-minute timeline for the rest of that night and the entirety of the following morning, portraying a routine that, while tinged with worry, was otherwise presented as perfectly normal. He claimed he had eventually gone to sleep, assuming Emily would return after she had calmed down, only realizing the true gravity of the situation when her family initiated contact the following day, expressing their profound concern. The detective's initial assessment of Jake was marked by cautious observation. While he presented as remarkably cooperative, there was a subtle undercurrent that piqued their professional curiosity. They understood that individuals under extreme stress, even innocent ones, could manifest nervousness or anxiety in various ways. But Jake's sustained calm seemed almost too practiced, too detached from the raw emotional turmoil one might expect from someone whose long-term girlfriend had just vanished without a trace. This unusual emotional detachment, coupled with the almost robotic precision of his recollection, struck them as slightly atypical. They concluded the interview by thanking him for his cooperation, underscoring the absolute importance of staying in regular contact and immediately providing any new information that might arise, no matter how insignificant it might seem. As Jake left the precinct, the detectives exchanged a silent, knowing glance, a shared intuition beginning to solidify that there might be more to Jake's story than his composed demeanor suggested. Their next critical step involved a comprehensive effort to corroborate every aspect of Jake's account and to gather further background information on Emily. They recontacted Emily's family, not only to deepen their understanding of Emily's life and habits, but also to gain insights into the intimate dynamics of her relationship with Jake. Family members confirmed that while disagreements between Emily and Jake were not entirely uncommon, as is typical in many relationships, they emphatically stressed that Emily had never simply vanished before, not even after their most heated arguments. They describe her as inherently responsible, deeply communicative, and fiercely protective of her relationships, making her sudden, complete disappearance without any form of contact deeply alarming and profoundly out of character. Friends echoed these sentiments, expressing shared confusion and escalating concern, noting that Emily always reached out, always checked in. Crucially, no one had heard from Emily, seen her, or received any communication from her since the night she purportedly left the apartment. Simultaneously, Detectives Harding and Ramirez initiated a widespread, rigorous search for Emily. Missing person bulletins were immediately issued, prominently featuring her photograph and physical description, which were circulated to every local and regional law enforcement agency. A broader community appeal for information was launched through media outlets, urging anyone with even the slightest lead to come forward. They systematically contacted local hospitals, emergency rooms, public transport hubs, including bus stations and train terminals, and even interviewed taxi services and rideshare drivers who operated in the area during the critical hours of her disappearance. They methodically exhausted every conventional avenue to track her potential movements after leaving the apartment. However, despite their exhaustive efforts, all leads came up empty. There was absolutely no verifiable trace of Emily after the time Jake claimed she had departed. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air after supposedly walking out her own front door, a fact that began to subtly, yet persistently, contradict the seemingly solid facade of Jake's initial, calm narrative. This unsettling void in Emily's known whereabouts, coupled with the increasing questions surrounding Jake's perfect recollection, subtly began to point the investigators towards the very person who claimed to be her concerned boyfriend, suggesting that the truth behind Emily's disappearance lay not in an unknown external force, but much closer to home. The initial investigation had begun methodically, but the profound, unsettling quiet surrounding Emily's absence spoke volumes, hinting at a hidden narrative far more sinister than a simple argument gone awry. As the initial search for Emily yielded no tangible results, and Jake's composed narrative began to feel increasingly out of sync with the grim reality of her continued absence, Detectives Harding and Ramirez shifted their approach. Their focus moved from merely gathering information to actively scrutinizing Jake's meticulously presented account. Experience had taught them that the truth often hides in the subtle cracks of a perfectly constructed story. Their first line of deeper inquiry involved a thorough review of surveillance footage from various locations surrounding Emily and Jake's apartment building. This proved to be a critical step. While Jake had calmly described Emily's departure at a specific time, confidently asserting her rapid exit, the cold, objective eyes of security cameras told a different story. Footage from a nearby ATM, positioned strategically to capture activity on the street, showed Jake's car leaving the apartment complex at a time that directly contradicted his stated timeline. He had claimed to be asleep, or at least in the apartment, after Emily's supposed departure. Yet, the timestamp on the video placed his vehicle, clearly identifiable, driving away from the complex hours before he claimed to have gone to sleep and returning much later in the dead of night. This discrepancy was not minor. It was a significant deviation, a direct challenge to the very foundation of his alibi. The car's movement suggested purposeful activity during hours when he asserted he was stationary. This initial crack in Jake's story quickly widened as detectives delved deeper into the environment surrounding the apartment. They initiated a more discreet, door-to-door canvass of neighbors, moving beyond general inquiries to specific questions about the night Emily disappeared. What they uncovered painted an increasingly troubling picture that starkly contrasted with Jake's calm portrayal of a simple argument. Several neighbors, who had previously been hesitant to get involved or perhaps hadn't fully connected their observations to Emily's disappearance, now came forward with accounts of hearing a loud and prolonged altercation emanating from Emily and Jake's apartment on the very night she vanished. These weren't just raised voices. They were described as an intense, furious argument punctuated by shouting, distressed cries, and what sounded like objects being thrown or broken. One neighbor, who lived directly beneath them, distinctly recalled a particularly violent crash followed by an abrupt, chilling silence. Another spoke of hearing what sounded like muffled cries for help, followed by a sudden, unnatural quiet, a silence that felt heavy and wrong. These accounts, often delivered by reluctant but compelled witnesses, significantly altered the narrative. They replaced Jake's cool recitation of minor dispute with a vivid, disturbing picture of a violent confrontation. The arguments described by neighbors were far more severe than the heated discussion Jake had presented. The timing of these loud disturbances also corresponded precisely with the estimated time of Emily's disappearance, linking the sound of conflict directly to her vanishing. The contrast between the neighbors' genuine distress and Jake's collected demeanor grew increasingly stark. Further investigation into the couple's relationship history, while not initially a focus, now became critically relevant. Friends and family, when re-interviewed with these new revelations in mind, began to share more nuanced details about the couple's dynamic. They admitted that Emily had, on occasion, expressed concerns about Jake's temper, describing him as controlling and prone to jealousy. There were vague references to previous intense arguments that had left Emily visibly shaken, though she had always downplayed them, perhaps out of loyalty or fear. This pattern of emotional volatility and control painted a vastly different picture of their relationship, one that directly contradicted Jake's portrayal of a largely healthy, if occasionally strained, partnership. These new insights into their relationship provided a potential motive for the violent confrontation that neighbors had overheard. The accumulation of these inconsistencies began to form a compelling pattern. Jake's fabricated timeline, exposed by the surveillance footage, suggested a deliberate attempt to conceal his movements during the critical hours of Emily's disappearance. The eyewitness accounts of a violent argument refuted his claim of a simple verbal dispute, and the deeper understanding of their relationship dynamics provided a context for such a severe altercation. Detectives Harding and Ramirez understood that these were not random coincidences. They were significant red flags, signals that Jake knew far more about Emily's disappearance than he was willing to admit. The investigation had moved beyond a missing person case. It was rapidly transforming into a criminal inquiry, with Jake shifting from a cooperative witness to the central figure of suspicion. The initial threads of doubt had woven themselves into a tight knot of suspicion, pulling the truth about Emily's fate closer into view. The pieces were starting to fit, forming a mosaic of deception and potentially a grave crime. The accumulating inconsistencies in Jake's story and the disturbing accounts from neighbors transformed the missing persons case into a full-fledged criminal investigation. Detectives Harding and Ramirez now viewed Jake not as a cooperative witness, but as the primary person of interest. Their next crucial step was to secure a search warrant for the apartment Emily and Jake shared, as well as for Jake's vehicle. They understood that the truth, if a crime had occurred, would likely be etched into the very environment of the incident. The apartment, once a potential scene of a simple domestic dispute, was now treated as a meticulous crime scene. Forensic specialists, clad in protective gear, moved with precision through every room, deploying advanced techniques to uncover any hidden clues. They utilized luminol sprays designed to detect even minuscule, invisible traces of blood that had been cleaned away. Under the eerie glow of the forensic light, various areas of the apartment illuminated with telltale luminescence, indicating the presence of blood where it should not have been. The most significant finding came from the bathroom. Traces of blood, faint but unmistakable, were discovered on the pristine white tiles surrounding the tub, in the grout lines, and even meticulously wiped from the faucet. This was not the kind of incidental blood that might result from a shaving cut or a minor abrasion. The pattern and location suggested a more significant event. Samples were carefully collected, sealed, and rushed to the laboratory for DNA analysis. Within hours, the results confirmed what detectives had begun to suspect. The blood belonged to Emily. This finding was a seismic shift in the investigation. Emily had not simply walked out of the apartment after an argument. She had bled inside, contradicting Jake's narrative of her calm departure. This piece of evidence transformed the case from a disappearance to a likely homicide, with the apartment now confirmed as the site of a violent incident. Simultaneously, a thorough forensic examination of Jake's car was underway. The vehicle, a seemingly ordinary sedan, became a repository of potential evidence. Investigators employed specialized vacuums to collect trace evidence, meticulously sifting through every fiber, every speck of dirt. Under high-powered microscopes, they discovered minute bloodstains on the passenger seat fabric and, surprisingly, in the trunk lining. These were not immediately visible to the naked eye, indicating an attempt at concealment. Like the samples from the apartment, these were quickly sent for DNA analysis. The results again were definitive. The blood found in Jake's car also belonged to Emily. This was a critical link, directly connecting Jake's vehicle to Emily in a violent context, severely undermining his claims of innocence. Beyond the blood evidence, the forensic team discovered other telltale signs within the car that painted a grim picture. Hair strands caught in the passenger door jamb matched Emily's hair, indicating she had been inside the vehicle at some point after a struggle. More alarmingly, fibers consistent with struggle, such as ripped fabric strands, were found embedded in the car's floor mats and stuck to the underside of the seats. These were not accidental. They indicated a violent confrontation had occurred within the confines of the vehicle, or that a struggle had taken place before she was placed inside. There were also faint but identifiable scuff marks on the interior plastic of the trunk, suggesting that a heavy object, possibly a body, had been dragged or forcibly moved within the space. These details meticulously dismantled any possibility that Emily had left the apartment unharmed or that Jake was merely a worried boyfriend. Back at the apartment, further examination revealed additional corroborating evidence. A kitchen knife block was found with one knife missing, despite Jake's claim that all cutlery was accounted for. While not conclusive on its own, it added to the growing list of unsettling details. Dust patterns under an area rug in the living room suggested it had been hastily moved, indicating a possible attempt to clean or hide something beneath it. The trash bin in the kitchen, despite being emptied, showed minute residue of cleaning agents that were inconsistent with routine household cleaning, pointing to a deliberate effort to sanitize. The combination of the surveillance footage, the neighbors' accounts of a violent altercation, and now the irrefutable forensic evidence, created an unassailable case against Jake. The DNA evidence, specifically, was a silent, powerful witness. It directly linked Emily, through her own biological material, to both the apartment and Jake's car in a context of clear violence. This wasn't merely circumstantial evidence. It was direct, tangible proof that Emily had suffered a violent assault and that Jake was deeply implicated in the immediate aftermath, if not the act itself. Detectives Harding and Ramirez now had their definitive proof. The narrative of Emily simply walking out after an argument was shattered, replaced by a chilling scenario of violence and concealment. The time had come for a second interview with Jake, one where the pretense of a missing person case would be dropped and the full weight of the evidence would be brought to bear. The quiet suburban neighborhood, once seemingly idyllic, had become the backdrop for a horrific crime, exposed piece by agonizing piece by the relentless pursuit of forensic truth. The game of cat and mouse had ended, and the net was tightening around the killer boyfriend, who thought he could outsmart the detectives. The meticulous gathering of forensic evidence had transformed Jake from a concerned witness into the prime suspect in Emily's disappearance and probable murder. Detectives Harding and Ramirez now possessed an arsenal of irrefutable facts. The surveillance footage contradicting his alibi, the neighbors' testimonies of a violent altercation, and most damningly, Emily's blood at his apartment and vehicle, along with other physical indicators of a struggle. The time had come for a second, far more direct interview, an interrogation. Jake was brought back to the precinct, seemingly unaware of the full extent of the evidence detectives had amassed. He was led into a stark, utilitarian interrogation room, devoid of distractions, its walls painted a neutral, uninviting color. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Harding and Ramirez sat opposite him. Their demeanor now shifted from initial empathy to one of unwavering resolve. The polite questioning of a missing persons case had given way to the relentless pursuit of truth. The interrogation began not with accusations, but with a calm, methodical presentation of the contradictions in Jake's story. Detective Harding, maintaining a steady gaze, started by placing printed stills from the surveillance footage before Jake. "Jake," he began, his voice even, "you told us you were in the apartment after Emily left. This footage shows your car leaving the complex at specific time and returning at specific time, hours before you claim to have gone to bed. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Jake's composure, which had held so steadfastly during the first interview, began to show its first cracks. He initially stammered, offering weak excuses, suggesting he might have forgotten a late-night errand or been mistaken about the precise timing. His eyes darted around the room, avoiding direct contact, a stark contrast to his earlier composed demeanor. The detectives allowed him to fumble, observing his every reaction, noting the subtle shifts in his body language, a slight tremor in his hands, a nervous tick in his jaw. Ramirez then interjected, bringing up the neighbors' accounts. "Several of your neighbors reported hearing a loud, violent argument from your apartment on the night Emily disappeared, not just a heated discussion. They heard shouting, distress cries, even sound of objects breaking. This is far more severe than what you described. What exactly happened, Jake? Confronted with the collective testimony of multiple witnesses, Jake's attempts at deflection became more desperate. He tried to downplay the argument, claiming neighbors must have exaggerated or misinterpreted the sounds. He suggested that relationships sometimes have loud moments, attempting to normalize the violence. He even floated the idea that someone else might have entered the apartment after Emily left, or that the sounds were perhaps from a different unit, grasping at any straw to divert suspicion. He continued to maintain his innocence, clinging to the narrative that Emily had simply left and then, perhaps, encountered trouble elsewhere. His arguments, however, were becoming increasingly convoluted and less convincing. The detective, however, had saved their most potent evidence for the opportune moment. Harding leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly, but gaining an undeniable gravity. "Jake, we found blood in the apartment. In the bathroom. Not just a drop, but traces consistent with a significant event. And the DNA confirms it's Emily's blood." He paused, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. "Then, we found more of Emily's blood in your car, in the passenger seat, in the trunk, along with her hair, and fibers consistent with a struggle. We also found scuff marks in the trunk. Emily didn't just walk out, Jake. She was injured, she was moved, and it happened in places only you had access to." The impact of the forensic revelations was immediate and profound. Jake's facade shattered, his face paled, and his eyes, which had been darting, now fixed on the detectives a look of stunned disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend how they had uncovered such irrefutable evidence. He visibly recoiled, his body language shifting from defensive to defeated. The careful composure he had maintained dissolved into visible distress. He tried to speak, but his words came out as strangled, incoherent mumbles. His denial became less convincing, more desperate. He weakly suggested that someone else must have harmed Emily after she left, someone who perhaps broke into his car or planted the evidence. But the sheer volume and specificity of the findings rendered these claims utterly implausible. The silence in the room became heavy, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of his unraveling deception. Under the relentless pressure, his demeanor began to shift dramatically. The initial cooperation evaporated, replaced by clear signs of immense stress and agitation. He fidgeted constantly, his gaze became unfocused, and his voice began to crack, losing its earlier calm. He started to contradict his earlier statements, forgetting details he had confidently presented, or altering portions of his alibi in a desperate attempt to create new, more plausible scenarios. These inconsistencies, now flowing freely from his own mouth, only served to further tighten the noose of suspicion around him. He spoke in fragmented sentences, a clear sign of his internal struggle and the crumbling of his fabricated reality. He was trapped, cornered by the undeniable truth that the detectives had meticulously assembled. The interrogation had moved beyond just exposing lies. It was pressing down on a conscience that was finally buckling under the weight of its own dark secrets. The killer boyfriend, who believed his cunning could outsmart skilled investigators, was now staring directly into the abyss of his own unraveling deception. The final, agonizing truth was moments away from being revealed. The interrogation room, once a battleground of wits and deception, now bore witness to the complete collapse of Jake's carefully constructed lies. Cornered by irrefutable forensic evidence, the cold, hard facts of surveillance footage, and the consistent testimonies of his own neighbors, Jake's composure had utterly disintegrated. His attempts at denial became frantic, then desperate, before finally dissolving into broken fragments of truth. The detectives, Harding and Ramirez, maintained their unwavering focus, their patient but relentless pressure having finally achieved its objective. After hours of intense psychological pressure, punctuated by periods of silence that seemed to scream louder than any accusation, Jake's resistance crumbled entirely. He slumped forward, his face buried in his hands, his body trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and the grim weight of his secret. The confession began not with a grand statement, but with a series of choked, guttural admissions. He confirmed what the evidence had long suggested. He had killed Emily. He recounted the horrifying details of that fateful night. The argument, he admitted, had indeed escalated far beyond a simple disagreement. It was a heated, furious confrontation, fueled by his own simmering anger and control issues, and Emily's growing desire for independence. He described her attempts to assert herself, to distance herself from his possessive grasp, which he perceived as a challenge, an unbearable threat to his control. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he lashed out, physically assaulting her. The precise sequence of events remained somewhat fragmented in his memory, perhaps a self-protective mechanism, but the core truth was undeniable. During that violent struggle, Emily lost her life at his hands. It was not an accident. It was a deliberate act born of overwhelming anger and a chilling disregard for her life. Jake then admitted to the meticulous, calculated measures he had taken immediately after the murder to conceal his crime. Overwhelmed by panic and a desperate desire to evade suspicion, he had embarked on a chilling mission to dispose of Emily's body. He described wrapping her in a blanket he found in the apartment, carrying her out to his car in the dead of night, and placing her in the trunk. His movements, captured by the distant surveillance camera and initially dismissed as a simple errand, were now revealed as the calculated actions of a killer attempting to erase his crime. He recounted driving for hours to a remote, secluded location, a densely wooded area far from their suburban neighborhood, chosen specifically for its isolation. There, under the cover of darkness, he had left her body, believing it would never be found, that the wilderness would claim her secrets forever. He had then driven back, meticulously cleaning his car and apartment, convinced that he had wiped away every trace of his horrific deed, that he could simply return to his life and feign ignorance. He thought he had outsmarted everyone, the police, Emily's family, even himself. His confession, though delivered in a low, broken voice, was chilling in its stark detail. He spoke of the fear of discovery, the arrogance that he could maintain his fabricated reality, and the profound relief he felt in finally unburdening himself, despite the grim consequences. The detectives meticulously documented every word, every detail, understanding that this was not just a confession, but the map to Emily's final resting place. Guided by Jake's detailed confession, a large-scale search operation was immediately launched. Teams of law enforcement officers, forensic specialists, and search and rescue personnel converged on the remote, heavily wooded area Jake had described. The terrain was challenging, dense with undergrowth, but Jake's directions, surprisingly precise in their despair, proved accurate. After an agonizing period of searching, Emily's body was finally located. Her remains were discovered exactly where Jake had indicated, a confirmation of his confession and a tragic testament to the brutal end of her life. The recovery of Emily's body was a pivotal moment, bringing a profound and somber sense of closure to her grieving family. For months, they had lived in an agonizing void of uncertainty, grappling with the unbearable weight of her disappearance. Now the questions, though answered by a horrific truth, could finally give way to the process of mourning. The body was transported to the medical examiner's office for a thorough autopsy, which further corroborated Jake's confession and initial forensic findings from the apartment and car. This additional evidence, collected meticulously from the remote scene, solidified the prosecution's case beyond any doubt. Every piece of the puzzle, from the faint bloodstains in the apartment to the location of her body, now fit perfectly, creating an unassailable timeline of violence and concealment. With Emily's body recovered and his full confession on record, Jake was formally arrested and charged with murder. The legal proceedings that followed were swift, driven by the overwhelming weight of the evidence. Jake's attempts at defense were futile against the irrefutable facts and his own detailed admission. He was found guilty, and the sentence handed down reflected the gravity of his crime. Justice, though delayed and born from immense sorrow, had finally been served for Emily and her family. The legal system had functioned as it was intended, holding a perpetrator accountable for his heinous actions. The story of Emily's murder and the meticulous investigation that unmasked her killer resonated far beyond the courtroom. It became a powerful and solemn reminder of the importance of thorough investigative work. It underscored the dedication of detectives who refused to be swayed by a seemingly cooperative suspect, instead choosing to dig deeper, to trust their instincts, and to meticulously follow every thread of evidence, no matter how small. It was a testament to the power of forensic science, the silent witness that can expose truth even when a perpetrator attempts to erase all traces. The case highlighted how critical it is for law enforcement to remain relentless in their pursuit of facts, unmasking deception piece by agonizing piece. Moreover, Emily's tragic story served as a stark, unavoidable reminder of the insidious dangers of domestic violence. Her seemingly sudden disappearance was, in reality, the culmination of a troubled relationship, one where control and anger had simmered beneath the surface. The case underscored that violence can lurk anywhere, even in quiet suburban neighborhoods, and that those who appear trustworthy can harbor dark, destructive secrets. It illuminated the importance of recognizing the signs of controlling or abusive behavior in relationships, and the critical need for individuals to seek help, for communities to offer support, and for society to take seriously any indication of such dangers. In its ultimate conclusion, Emily's story is not just a tale of murder and justice. It is a cautionary narrative, a poignant reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that vigilance is always necessary. It reaffirms a profound truth that deception, no matter how cunningly crafted, can never truly outsmart the relentless pursuit of truth, especially when driven by dedicated detectives committed to uncovering the full, unvarnished story. Emily's memory, though tragically cut short, lives on as a silent advocate for awareness, a testament to the enduring power of justice to prevail, and a stark warning that even those closest to us can harbor the darkest of intentions.
Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more.